My name is Nancy Love, and I want to tell you about a very unfortunate conversation I had with someone recently. He saw me as a very, very bright star intellectually and in terms of my creativity. He was a person young enough to be my grandson, very literally young enough to be my grandson. And yet he opened the conversation saying that he was attracted to me romantically and otherwise and wanted to see if there was any chance of our having a romantic relationship. He said he was in love with me. And I thought, whoa, where's that coming from? I barely knew the guy and had seen him and spoken to him only briefly a couple of times. I am a person who studied all kinds of philosophical and religious, spiritual things when I was a very small child. Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, all this kind of stuff that helps you teach yourself how to control your own mind. Then I studied psychology and I learned impulse control, but not just impulse control in terms of one's physical behavior, impulse control in terms of one's psychological behavior, both spiritual and philosophical things and psychological studies have all taught me to control what I fantasize about. And I learned years ago, primarily from yoga, the Brahma yoga, the yoga of wisdom, is that you don't even fantasize about an inappropriate love object. You don't, if you're a guy who works in an office and you're attracted to your female secretary or your male secretary for that standpoint, and she or he is engaged or married or whatever, unavailable, you don't sit around fantasizing about that person. If you're a junior high school student and you halfway to being infatuated by your social studies teacher, you don't sit around fantasizing about an adult male who's married. You go after the kid, the boy in the next seat. You don't even fantasize about people who are not appropriate targets for your romantic inclinations. Well, this kid never learned what I learned when I was 7 and 8 and 9 years old, nor did he ever learn what I learned in psychology classes as an adult. He was sitting around thinking that I was going to be his dream girl, or at least so he said initially. But I kept talking to him, and I said, well, I'm fond of you, and I appreciate this, you know, beginnings of friendship. I didn't know if it was friendliness or actual friendship, but I appreciate both. And he said, well, you're encouraging me. I said, well, not, I kept telling him I didn't think that there was a snowball's chance in Hades that people who are as far apart as we are chronologically could have a successful relationship. And at one point, he said that he knew that he would always be considered the kid, and I would always be considered the old lady. And I said, that's right. That's exactly what would happen. I have seen and heard, experienced, and sort of halfway counseled people who were in relationships with a much shorter age differential, and it just didn't work out because the younger one was always considered inferior and lacking in evolution, and the older one was always considered, you know, incapable or, of having youthful experience and so forth. I think young people should be with young people because they need to go hiking. Old people should be with old people because they can't go hiking anymore. It's that simple. I'm in a wheelchair. I haven't been able to stand up or walk for 5 years. What the heck would I want with some guy in his 20s who's vigorous and healthy and has decades, I hope, decades and decades of physiological vigor ahead of him? So, anyway, it wasn't working for me. And I tried to discourage him. And then he said, well, the truth of the matter was that he wanted authority over me. He actually said the following words. He said, that men are given, uh, uh, this makes me want to puke. He said, men in this are given authority over their women. And he, although he was much younger than I was, wanted to have authority over me as well as control over my archive of intellectual property when I die. How's that for a romantic attachment, huh? Boy, he sure doesn't know how to get a date. I want authority over you. I want to have access to and control your intellectual property when you die. Yeah, no, not going to happen. I asked him what in this means, and he said, well, I think you'd call it the mafia. A lot of people call it the mafia, but we call it just being in. And then he said, remember that old Mazda commercial, Are You In? I said, yeah, I sensed something really insidious about that. I thought that commercial, Are You In, was in poor taste and had connotations that I was not comfortable with. And he said, yeah, and those people are bouncing around in Mazdas all happy. He said, we're not happy. He said, well, maybe some people are because they embrace greed and they get something out of this. But he said, people who are in are not happy. And I said, I believe you. And I'm not in. So I have steadfastly remained outside and innocent of all this garbage that you people allow yourself to be enslaved by. But I'm not one of you. I'm not in. And he said that he knew that and he respected that and, in fact, admired it. And we went on and we continued to have a fairly calm chat. But the fact that someone who was in his 20s sat me down, initially tried to house what he was talking about in terms of some ill begotten romance that I didn't believe for a minute, and then said that he wanted to have authority over me. Not gonna happen. And that he wanted control of my intellectual and creative property when I died. Not gonna happen. Was so massively offensive that I want you all to know about the conversation, primarily because of the part about in. Now, I have made some extremely controversial, I'm told very, very brave um, YouTube videos that talk about science fiction uh, screenplay and novel that I'm trying to get done called Return to Innocence, Game Over. Return to Innocence, Game Over is contextually science fiction, but a lot of it is autofiction or observed. Autofiction means slightly fictionalized things that you've experienced or learned yourself in your life, your real life. Or it's based on things I've heard about and had people tearfully, often outraged, crying people explain to me. Because there are a lot of people who know stuff about this that I don't know, but I know enough about it to be terrified and outraged and very adamant about not being brought in. I, Nancy Love, the Planet Peace Woman, have fought recruitment for 26 years. And I'm still not in, which I'm told makes me what they call a great lady. So this is Nancy Love, the great lady, telling you resist recruitment at all costs because it's going to make you stupid. There's a context in which men think they have authority over, quote, their, unquote, women, otherwise known as slavery, but those men themselves are enslaved. They have sworn to a Bushido that can only bite them and chew them alive. It will destroy your soul. Something on this world is so insidious, so massive, so evil, that it's going around masquerading as street gangs and the Hollywood mafia and all the other mafias. But what it's trying to do is enslave you and consume your very soul. So I'm going to break out of the frame of the science fiction context of the Return to Innocence, Game Over. And I'm telling you, if this is all news to you, or if you only have some small inkling of what I'm talking about, stay out. Don't be tempted. Don't be threatened. Don't think it's glamorous. Resist at all costs. At all costs. Recruitment into what they call in, because from what these people tell me that they've had to do in order to survive once they get brought in, you would be better off dead than in. No one will ever have authority over me or control over my archive. Eventually, I may die. But this kid who thinks he can own someone 4 decades more advanced than he is, this child who thinks he can have authority over me when I'm a brilliant, passionate, compassionate hero, and he's just in. He's just another slave, is wrong. And if he ever tries to put his little Nazi jackboot on my head again, he's going to find that I kick, and I kick hard. I'm going to sue him and the company he works for, because I don't appreciate anybody thinking that he can pull a honey trap and do a mafia authority figure kind of thing on someone who has literally fought with every fiber of my being in since March 15th, 1995. More later. I'm just getting started.